So there are a number of segments, industry segments, where we have seen quite a bit of traction. But if it be the entire startup segment, the digital segment, the entire segment of BFSI, auto, retail, education, all of these areas we are quite thoroughly penetrated.
Is that a kind of a challenge that Salesforce is facing because of a lot of infrastructure sitting on-prem versus moving into a public cloud?
Most of the newer evolving technologies are not being written for on-prem systems or for private cloud capabilities. They are all public cloud capabilities. The human can always participate and augment what the AI is doing, and the AI can augment what the human is doing. They can work in partnership, but it is not necessary. And all of this creating of the individual curricula is feasible through your AI today, because then you could have agents that actually take people through the various steps of what they need, monitor the progress, give suggestions, and ensure that you are coming up to potential.
Hello and welcome to The Interface, the Hindus podcast to make sense of the accelerating pace of change underpinned by technology. I'm your host, Xavier. In today's episode, we are joined by the Chairperson and CEO of Salesforce India, Arundhati Bhattacharya. Ms. Bhattacharya, glad to have you on The Interface. Thanks for joining.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Great. And I know, Ms. Bhattacharya, you've been receiving this question a lot, but I'd like to slightly place it differently from, being an ex-banker and being as a tech CEO now. You would have seen a lot of things happening in technology through the banking industry's lens. How different is it, this transition into a pure tech world, and also at a time when tools like ChatGPT and Gen AI were, coming one after the other? How did you manage that transition? Could you give a sense of, how the world was for you around that time?
Well, I think one of the biggest differences was that I was on the other side of the table. When I was in the fins industry, I was on the side of the customer, receiving or buying technology in order to run our business and trying to find the best fit and ensuring that there was a proper translation of our needs to the people who created the technology, so that or we could create the best of experiences. Today it's just the opposite, in the sense that I sit on the side of the sellers of technology, selling in to those same people where I used to sit at one point of time. And I think what that enables me to do is to appreciate much more the pains that the customer has, their expectations, and their ideas about how they should get to whatever is the vision that they have. So I think being on both sides of the table is actually a major advantage, because now I know all of the tools that are available. Earlier, I never had any idea about all the tools that are available in order to achieve what we needed to achieve. Sometimes I tell my people that, like if you go into a bookshop these days and you visit the kids section, I don't know about you, but I want to become a kid again, because we never had such attractive looking books when we were kids. The same feeling overcomes me when I see the tools that are available today. I want to go back and become a banker, because now there are so many things that are available that would have enabled me to function way better than what I could actually achieve. Now I'm saying, so, this transition in a way has been a real eye-opener. It's also been something that's given me a true understanding of the potential of a good partnership with a tech company and how that can really change the story.
Right. And also, I think the last 3 or 4 years for Salesforce in India itself has been growth years, and it's been a sort of a force to reckon with a lot of SaaS related developments happening in India. What do you think have been the key, factors driving this growth for India, and also particularly how has things changed since the pandemic and when people started to open up the markets?
So if you ask me what drives the growth story, you know, India has a lot of digital talent in the individual space. But if you
Mm.
look at industries, we still are one of the slower adopters of technology. And the reason for that necessarily has been that we are really a capital deficient country. Therefore, people are very careful about the spends that they make. And whatever they have done in the way of technology, it creates what we call a pretty large technology debt, tech debt. And therefore, if you are asking them to make a lot of changes, they are obviously very deliberate about it. And therefore, we have not seen the kind of adoption that we have seen in many other places where people have had the luxury of having a lot of capital. That being the case, the need for it is being felt all the same. And because there is a need for it, therefore, it is conducive to our growth because we are able to show them how, without really having to write off everything, without having to, as we call it, rip and replace, they can still create really great experiences for their customers by connecting to them in many, many different ways, while, their core systems remain the same. And that, I think, is the main reason why we have seen such growth here in India.
Right. And also, if you were to pick out specific industries in India,
Hmm. Hmm.
where would you be able to pick certain ones saying that, these are things where you have more traction in terms of adoption for SaaS tools, while others are more traditional and legacy units? Is that something that you could
Yeah,
pick from India?
yeah, surely. Surely. So, across the world, the BFSI segment, that is the financial segment, is always the most mature and the one where we have the maximum traction. Here in India, it's not different. But we also have a lot of traction in areas like retail, in areas like autos, in areas like education, especially online education, in areas like manufacturing, because auto is part of manufacturing in any way. So there are a number of segments, industry segments, where we have seen quite a bit of traction. Where do we find it difficult? We find it difficult in areas like EPC contractors, for instance, which is construction. We have not yet been able to make a lot of inroads into areas like utility, power generation, some of the core industries, so to speak, other than cement. Cement, we are pretty strong. We are okay also in steel, but we could make far better inroads into steel. So, yes, I would say some of the legacy core industries are places where we haven't been able to still have the kind of traction we'd like to have. But whether if it be the entire startup segment, the digital segment, the entire segment of BFSI, auto, retail, education, all of these areas we are quite thoroughly penetrated.
Right. And when you talk about BFSI, it's also one of those, particularly if I were to take banking within that BFSI group,
Yeah.
is been highly on-prem setup where a lot of their software and everything is kept inside, particularly in India. And most of the SaaS development that's been happening has been in development for the cloud native systems. So how is that a kind of a challenge that Salesforce is facing because of a lot of infrastructure sitting on-prem versus moving into a public cloud?
So we don't have that challenge with the private sector. We do have
Mhm.
that challenge hugely with the public sector. We have spoken to the regulators, and the regulators have pointed out that there is no circular of theirs that prevents the usage of the public cloud. And, when we have talked to the ministry, they feel similarly. But the public sector is still not confident about how they can go about using it. The private sector, however, have made pretty big strides in this area. We are not seeing too much of challenge there. Yes, they may ultimately work in a hybrid kind of an environment, keep their PII on-prem and use it, whenever they need to do some processing and bring it back. So all of those things are there. But if you look at the public sector, I very much fear that, the public sector is not looking at it in the same manner. And ultimately, as you rightly say, most of the newer evolving technologies are not being written for on-prem systems or for private cloud capabilities. They're all public cloud capabilities. And unless there is a change in view that comes about in the public sector banking space, I definitely am apprehensive that they will be falling behind.
Right. And could this be a result of a more traditional thinking that on-prem is more secure, while cloud is more susceptible to, cyber
100%.
attacks?
100%. I think it's nothing other than it's mostly a security worry. But what I would love it is if they really sat down and had a look at it, because, some of the most advanced, even, in various countries, the government installations are on public cloud. Even for that matter, in India itself, I think half of the India stack sits on the public clouds.
Mhm.
And the public cloud providers have now put in a lot of effort to try and improve their security posture. So I think, that's really not something that we should be so worried about. Whatever is the worry needs to be squarely and fairly addressed, which is
Mhm.
not something that we are seeing as yet. There are certain presumptions or ideas that people have, and I don't see an honest attempt to try and really get down to what is holding them back and then trying and addressing that.
Right. So one of the things that also comes up when we specifically talk about SaaS, data security, and cyber attacks is the kind of incidents like the SolarWinds or the most recent CrowdStrike, where these internet-based cloud systems kind of completely goes underground. So in your case as Salesforce, how do you have that conversation with clients such as, let's say, public sector banks in India? How do you tell them about the security that's built into a public cloud, and how can Salesforce provide better security to the data that's hosted on these clouds?
So, it's not as though if people are simply on-prem, they will be able to avoid issues such as these. Okay. The only thing that happens is on-prem, if some issue hits you, then probably it will be secluded within your particular organization. It will not impact others. But the fact that today we are getting into a more and more connected world, so even on-prem, if you are just there and secluded, should say something like the internet go down, would it not impact everybody? Ultimately, if you look at the branches, they are also all connected. So should something impact them, they'll also get disconnected. So I think, we need to weigh the risks with the rewards rather than, have a closed mind towards it.
Right. So I'd like to come to the agentic framework and Gen AI, and particularly bring our attention back to the agent force that Salesforce unveiled last month. Could you give a sense on what this is, what it can do for organizations in India?
Yes. So basically, again, if you go back to what is happening in AI, so predictive AI and machine learning came into its own from, say, around 2014. Okay. And predictive AI was something that we had been using till about maybe 2022 or 23 when ChatGPT came on the scene. What is it that is different between predictive AI and generative AI? The major difference, in my view, is that predictive AI was restricted because the engine could understand only structured data and also needed to be queried by people who could write down the queries in computer language. That was the ability of the AI engine. Now, with generative data, what happened was suddenly the world opened up because this engine could now understand natural language. Okay. And because it could understand natural language and it didn't have to have structured data, it opened up a whole horde of sources from which data could be gathered. And instead of only millions of data points, it could process quintillions of data points. And to that extent, it therefore became smarter because it was looking at far more data points. Now, while the input made it smarter, the ability for many more people to query this engine also became much more widespread because, again, it could be queried in natural language and you did not need to be an expert in computer usage in order to be able to query the engine. So both input and output became democratized. And as the engine began to get more and more queries and understand it more and more, it began to learn more, it began to, assimilate much more and become much smarter in the process. And therefore, it could generate those responses that, you had probably not even thought was feasible. Now, this was the second phase. However, we have very quickly moved on to the third phase. And the third phase is what you were talking about, the agentic experience, where agents have become autonomous. And the difference between the second and the third phase is again the fact that the third phase has a far more powerful reasoning engine. So now the AI engine not only has access to a lot of data, it also is able to reason like a human being and therefore is able to be almost autonomous. It does not require another human being necessarily in the process. Yes, you can keep the human being in if you feel that the transaction is too large or needs to be overseen. The human can always participate and augment what the AI is doing, and the AI can augment what the human is doing. They can work in partnership, but it is not necessary. The agent, in many, many cases, can do things which are repetitive, which have laid down workflows all by itself. Now, what this does is basically you can imagine it really revolutionizes the customer experience. When you are trying for a call center of, say, any bank, almost invariably you'll get put on hold while you listen to music. Now, with Agent Force, actually, this need no longer happen because you can have sufficient agents to answer your every call as soon as it lands. Agent Force will also have the ability to spin up more agents, which are lights to itself, if they find that the call volumes are going up. So the wait that you have to have before your call gets answered gets reduced hugely. Not only that, Agent Force is able to execute a lot of their jobs on their own. And therefore, unlike earlier on, where a human agent would have to open 5 screens in order to do a job and then confirm to you it is done, with Agent Force, actually speaking, all of this can be reduced into simple API calls that will trigger workflows that will get your job done. And you will get the response saying, that yes, you brought this problem to us, this job is done, and here is, the end result of it. So to that extent, it revolutionizes the customer interactions, not only for banks, but, consider something like a state hospital today. a state hospital where there are so many patients that the doctor doesn't even have the time to lift his head and look at the face of the patient. Now, if Agent Force was involved over here, what it could do as soon as the patient came in, it could actually interact with the patient, take down all the symptoms, come up with the initial analysis or a diagnosis, so that when you actually see the doctor, this is already in front of you. The doctor reads it, and then instead of asking you questions, because all questions have been asked already, is actually able to value add on whatever the machine or the system has been able to generate. So similarly, if you look at classrooms, today classrooms are, say, ideally 35 to sometimes it's even 60 people. And you cannot expect 35 human beings as kids to march all in step. There will be some people who can be far ahead, some people who will need more time. And all of this creating of the individual curricula is feasible through your AI today, because then you could have agents that actually take people through the various steps of what they need, monitor the progress, give suggestions, and ensure that you are coming up to potential. So, it can make a huge difference in the way we live our lives. But
Right.
having said that, when I
Mm.
first saw the Agent Force performance, that is the demos, I
Mhm.
had the feeling that a villager must have had when he first saw a steam engine puffing and puffing its way across the horizon. Feeling is absolutely similar. It is a feeling of excitement. It's a feeling of anxiety and fear. It's a fear of, unknown things. And yet there is a huge amount of, as I said, excitement and curiosity to know what more it can do.
Yeah, I'd like to sit on that feeling because I felt the same when these agentic systems were being rolled out at different places. What could be the impact of jobs when these kind of agents are put in? Because one is these tasks have been fulfilled by humans, and we are not too sure what could be the impact of this on the overall jobs. Is that something that you have studied in terms of how will this impact the current jobs?
See, it's not that I have studied this. Difficult to study it. But if I consider the fact that such revolutions have happened in the past, and humankind has not suffered on account of it. Today, when we had only handloom workers, we used to get clothes maybe once or twice a year. Today, we get clothes almost every other day. Okay. Are there more textile workers? Yes, there are. Similarly, if you look at medicine, have we progressed? Yes, we have. So I believe that there will be a transition period when people will need to upskill, and that
Mm,
period will necessarily be painful. But
right.
as this increases or improves our standard of living, more jobs of different kinds will get created. And we will definitely absorb the workforce that is likely to be, displaced from traditional jobs. But they will find their way by learning other skills and other jobs. Change, you cannot stop change. What I would
Mm,
suggest is let's lean into the change and try to see how we can evolve along with it.
right. I have one last question, and also specifically on the agentic framework, is how does the cost differentials play out? Because one of the key economics here is that how much does it cost to deploy an agent versus having a human do the same thing? So, and this could be different in terms of purchasing power parity between advanced economies and developing ones. How does this play out in the Indian context?
So, we have to be at the market. We realize that as well. I cannot possibly replace a human being who's costing me 1/10. Okay. May not be worth it. So, to that extent, I obviously have to have a pricing for such emerging markets. Even for our regular licenses, we have an emerging market pricing. And I see no difference about the way it will happen over here. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not able to justify by cost, I'm not going to be able to sell anything yet. So I wouldn't worry too
Right.
much about it. I think we will come round to, finding a way to balance all of this. But I don't see us not approaching the market because the costs will be so prohibitive that they will not be able to use it. I don't see that happening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Mhm.
Arundhati. Thanks for taking the time out and sharing your insights on how agentic framework works and how things will change and evolve. And also, thanks for sharing your insights on the overall cloud ecosystem and how SaaS is being implemented. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you for tuning in to the Interface podcast. For more such episodes on technology and innovation, tune in to the Interface on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Do share your comments with us at the interface at thehindu.co.in. To keep yourself updated with the latest tech, please go to thehindu.com or follow us on all social media platforms. Thank you.